Hello and welcome to the second edition of Food Safety Essentials. It's not Friday, it's Wednesday, hump day. So you're all very welcome. And Food Safety Essentials is our regular Wednesday webinar series with Tony Connor. So welcome, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Simon. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
And today's subject, it's a follow-up from the first Food Safety Essentials, recalls.
Yeah, what food safety data tells us about recalls and what can we do about it, part 2.
Okay, and as usual, it's the presentation and then a Q&A. So, yeah, hopefully an engaging webinar. So welcome, everybody. Tell us where you're joining from in the sidebar. As usual, Sakib from Chicago, Martha from Toronto, Jan from Netherlands. It's going fast now. Darla from Indiana. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. I'll hand you over to Tony and I'll be back for the questions after.
So as we've already said, welcome. So this is what food safety data, recall data tells us, part 2, and what can we do about it. So this is a slide from 2013, Food Safety Live, and we said then, if you take nothing else from this presentation, then note 60% of recalls were related to allergen management, labeling, and label information. From 2020, out of 879 recalls, 53.2% were due to labeling and undeclared allergens. From 2022, a third of recalls were due to pathogen contamination. And on to the latest data. Analysis of FDA recall notices from 21 to 24 showed out of 771 recalls, 46.4% were due to labeling or undeclared allergens, and 29.3% were due to environmental pathogens, Salmonella and Listeria. Here's a quick reminder, there have been 2 massive Listeria-related food safety incidents this summer. There was 10 deaths from the boar's head outbreak. And there was also a massive recall of Bruceback ready-to-eat meat and poultry products, about £12 million in total. Over 75% of recalls are due to problems either caused by labeling or undeclared allergens or by product contamination with well-known environmental pathogens, Listeria and Salmonella. So based on recall data, these 2 are the biggest issues in the food industry. Previously, we talked about environmental pathogens, and today we're going to talk about labeling and undeclared allergens. The causes of these problems are due to problems with lack of allergen management, packaging, printing, labeling, and label errors. These can stem from problems with design and development, hazard analysis, label control, management of allergens, claims, product packaging, control of operations or lack of control, lack of line labeling controls, and lack of training. Issues from lack of allergen control and management can come from people, raw materials, manufacturing, operations, cleaning, product development, changes, and packaging. As we know, contamination of food with allergens is extremely serious, and in allergen-sensitive individuals can potentially be fatal. In the US, there are 9 food or food groups identified as major allergens. They're on there, on the left-hand side, and in the EU, 14. So, examples of sources of allergen cross-contamination are here. They include things like suppliers, raw materials, equipment, people, cleaning, etc. Let's look at labeling. Problems with labeling are caused by errors in product development, supplier-related errors, a lack of control of changes, operational issues, including wrong label and human errors. Let's start with errors in product development. Errors include lack of development control, incorrect artwork approval, a lack of training or understanding or knowledge, a lack of direction from senior management, a lack of input from food safety teams, and a lack of input from operations. New product development or the introduction of new ingredients can compromise existing activities of products that are handled in the same operation. For example, the introduction of new allergen risks. New products and operations need to be risk assessed and managed to prevent the contamination of existing products. Errors in supplier and material approval. Ineffective or no supplier approval, no agreed specification or inaccurate specifications, lack of input from the food safety team, unapproved and unauthorized purchases. So purchase of materials from non-approved suppliers can obviously cause issues with lack of allergen control or information, and also the emergency use of materials if not managed appropriately. Other issues include lack of control of changes, so change of supplier, change of ingredients or materials, change of packaging, change of recipe, change of operations, equipment, changes in legislation. Operational issues include poor control of allergens and allergenic materials, poor design, layout, process flow, human errors, incorrect identification of product, errors in line clearance and changeovers, equipment, lack of training or understanding, and cross-contamination. Product labeling. Errors come from lack of guidance on new products and ingredients, lack of knowledge, no ingredient risk analysis, no product risk analysis, old and obsolete labels, poor storage and stock controls, promotional activities and products, last-minute production, print areas. You can get problems with obsolete packaging, and here are the problem. Accountants, they don't like stock write-off, costs of disposal, and there can also be excess stock due to poor planning and stock control. These items sitting around pose a risk. So the control of operations is key to eliminating the problems illustrated. Getting the fundamentals right when implementing a HACCP system based on Codex HACCP principles is important. The food safety team need to identify and record all potential hazards, considering allergen risks or including allergen risks. There should be approval HACCP for new products. All new products and changes to product formulation, packaging, or methods of processing should be formally approved by the food safety team. Any new hazard should be assessed and suitable controls identified through food safety system and implemented before products are introduced into the environment, into the facility. Experience has shown that even minor changes to ingredients, packaging, or processing conditions can have a significant effect on the safety of products. The assessment of any potential impact on product safety and subsequent sign-off must occur before products are introduced into the facility. So, for example, a sign-off must be completed before factory trials begin to ensure that new risks, such as from allergens, are not introduced into the facility without suitable controls approved by the food safety team. For significant hazards, control measures must be in place for the hazard. Moving on to packaging, printing, label and label control. Management of the following contribute to packaging and label control. Design and development, hazard analysis as mentioned, and food safety plans, product label controls, management of allergen, product packaging controls, control of operations, including traceability, labeling and pack control, and training. The management controls of product labeling activities need to ensure that products will be correctly labeled and coded. Product design and development procedures need to be in place for new products or processes and for any changes to ensure safe and legal products are produced. These requirements include the need for product development, approval of hazard for new products, and factory trials. You should consider your organizational structure and senior management control of food safety and product development. Senior management should provide guidelines on any restrictions to the scope of new product developments to control the introduction of hazards which would be unacceptable to the site or customers. For example, the introduction of new hazard risks such as allergens. From experience, I believe it works better to have a manager in control of both food safety and product development to help in coordination between departments. So, design and development procedures need to be in place for new products and processes and any changes to ensure that safe and legal products are produced. A process change approval record and procedure can be used for this. This sort of system includes full details of the proposed change, a risk assessment summary and change categorization. The need for new or revised hazard plans is reviewed. There's process change validation, the production trials for acceptable quality and food safety, confirmation of correct operation of equipment and subsequent reviews, approval of the process changes by department managers, new process and finished products, specifications issued and agreed and authorized, and a final process change approved by the general manager or CEO. Artwork and print approval is important and required for new products or processes and any changes to ensure that the safe and legal products are produced. Systems should be in place to ensure that product labels meet all the legal requirements for country of sale. An authorized qualified person should be approving these labels. This person should ensure they are kept up to date with labor requirements in the country of manufacture and sale, and these requirements are accurately transferred onto the packaging and labels. Materials brought onto site should be sourced through approved suppliers and monitored. This approval process and monitoring of materials should be based on potential risks the material represents in terms of authenticity, legality, and safety. There should be an initial approval process and ongoing monitoring. There needs to be a documented risk assessment of each material and group of materials, including packaging, to identify potential risks. The documented risk assessment should take into account the potential for allergen contamination and check the allergen status of all ingredients with suppliers and review regularly. It should clearly identify raw materials and segregate where possible. Supplier and raw material can be approved via certification, audit, or questionnaire, depending on the risk of the supplier and materials. A valid certification to an applicable GFSI benchmark standard with the scope of the certification to include the material purchased is acceptable, but you should check certificate and scope validation directories. Approval can also be by supplier audits. There should be a process for ongoing review and monitoring of suppliers. As I said before, you need to check the allergen status of ingredients with suppliers and review regularly. You should also ask suppliers to notify of changes in the allergen status of the materials they supply. So, it's a fundamental requirement that a system is in place for the management of allergen materials, which minimize the risk of allergen contamination and cross-contamination of products and meets legal requirements for labeling in the country of sale. There should be a list of all the allergens handled on site, including raw materials and finished products. As we mentioned before, there should be a risk assessment covering all potential sources of allergen cross-contamination. Should be identification and implementation of control measures to reduce or eliminate the risk of cross-contamination. And there should be validation, where appropriate, and verification of these control measures. Incoming materials and food ingredients should be procured according to specifications, and their compliance with food safety and suitability specifications should be verified when necessary. Specifications can help ensure that raw materials and other ingredients are fit for purpose and contaminants have been minimized. Specifications for all raw materials, including primary packaging materials, should be provided and adequately detailed, including any allergen content. They should include defined limits for all parameters critical to safety, legality, and quality of the product. The following areas need to be considered and addressed: raw material assessment, a list of allergenic materials, risk of cross-contamination, cross-contamination procedures, control of rework, on-pack warning labels if necessary, allergen claims, allergen cleaning regimes, identification of relevant allergens as per legislation and customer requirements, analysis of raw material and ingredient content and potential allergen content. This is an important part in identifying all allergens on site. There should be identification of ingredients with the allergen content and possible allergen content, and similarly for suppliers where ingredients are supplied are at risk from contamination. There should be identification of products containing allergens and possibly containing allergens. There should be confirmation of the process flow of ingredients and products. There should be identification of cross-contamination risks in operations for ingredients and products. There needs to be a system of allergen control prerequisites and an allergen control plan where appropriate. You also need to generate a finished product allergen summary, and this can assist in production scheduling. This production scheduling can help reduce risk producing higher risk allergen products after lower risk allergens or non-allergens. For example, here we've got allergen-free products and then products with allergens in a schedule. Ideally, you'd have dedicated production lines or areas rather than schedule everything on the same line, but that's not always possible. There should be specific documented procedures to prevent rework containing allergens from being used in products or processes that do not contain those allergens. The best practice is for rework to be used on a like-for-like basis. This means it is used only in exactly the same product. The use of rework needs to be documented. Identification of raw materials, intermediate products, part-use materials, finished products, and materials pending investigation needs to be in place to ensure traceability. Allergen clean validation and verification may be required when running multiple products with different allergens on the same production line. You may need to validate that cleaning and disinfection programs effectively remove the allergen of concern. Validation and verification of cleaning performance can be achieved using ELISA, enzyme-linked immunoassay, for validation and ATP swabs for verification, although ELISA may be required for verification if ATP isn't found to be effective for that purpose. Product labeling. Product labeling shall comply with appropriate legal requirements and contain information to ensure the safe handling, display, storage, and preparation of a product. We need to check the legality of labels. We need to control any third-party label design. And we need to validate any instructions. Packaging. Packaging should be fit for purpose and comply with relevant food safety legislation. When purchasing food contact packaging, the goods in system must check the accuracy of printed packaging materials and labels, as well as the retention of samples. Product labeling control. There needs to be a process to verify that ingredients and allergen labeling is correct based on the product recipe and ingredient specification. There needs to be effective process in place to ensure that labeling information is reviewed whenever there are changes, including product recipe, materials, supply, or legislation. As I've just mentioned, the control of third-party label design, where the label information is responsibility of a customer or nominated third party, needs to be controlled to ensure that the label is accurately created and that changes are controlled. If applicable, there should be validation of cooking instructions, and these should be printed on the label. This is ensure that product is consistently safe to eat when the instructions are followed. There should also be clear product descriptions on your product. Here, customer confusion caused an outbreak because customers misunderstood the product description. They thought that the product, broiled chicken livers, was already cooked. Storage instructions need to be checked and approved. This award-winning frozen product was recalled as the products were incorrectly labeled chilled product, keep refrigerated. So operations need to ensure label controls, that labels are approved, that labels are checked for accuracy, that packaging and label standards are documented and communicated. Good practices include changes in raw materials, including labels, are communicated to goods receipt personnel. The management of obsolete packaging, as I've mentioned before, including labels. When having online verification equipment, having appropriate procedures to control those, and that relevant personnel receive training on labeling and packing processes. Any changes to labels should be approved and communicated to goods receipt personnel. An assigned approved standard should be provided to staff carrying out those checks. Label use. Processes need to be in place to check label use is reconciled with expected use and the cause of any inconsistencies investigated, including the total issues, the product total, known waste, total returned. We should then cross-check against normal usage figures and investigate any abnormal use, such as under or over. Label checks and retention. This is an example of a label check. The label is checked by 2 operators hourly, and then when there are changes. A supervisor checks throughout the shift and a production manager at the end of the shift or production day. Label samples are retained. So for all these activities, there needs to be verification, which should be implemented to check that procedures are effective. Just a quick word on complaints. From SQF Code guidance, customer complaints may also show trends that have not been identified during processing and normal process control checks. Customer complaints may be the first record that an auditor checks when beginning their site audits. Customer complaints can provide an auditor insight into the performance of the supplier's SQF system and any trend areas that may require greater focus. Well, this is also important for sites and getting good feedback on communication of complaints. So if there is something wrong, you get an early warning from any complaints coming in. Training of relevant employees is a massive part of achieving control of operations. Training should include initial training and supervision, critical control point training. There should be a documented training program and records and competency review. But in particular, there should be on-site allergen training and training on the site labeling and packing processes. So we've got half an hour's question and answer time if we've got any questions. So it can be about anything regarding food safety. So we'll answer questions on labeling or allergen management. But these sessions are generally thrown open to any sort of food safety questions you might have.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a connection problem.
Me?
I don't know. BG Ravi Kumar or something. Oh, right.
Yeah, the question.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, most of the food processing units process different food products, especially from India, use many allergen ingredients. To everybody, how food chain end user ensure there are no allergen contamination due to allergen cross contact has been controlled or not? Can you pick a question out from there, Tony?
Well, when you're processing different food products, you need to know what allergens are in them. You need to assess the risk associated with each and the risk of cross-contamination if you're doing them on the same line. So ideally, you in a perfect world, you do different allergen products on different lines, but if you don't, then you might need to clean in between, and you usually start with the day after a full clean with an allergen-free product, and then you work down risk, and typically, let's say a peanut is the highest risk, so if you produce products with peanuts, those would be last, and then you might do a full allergen clean and a swab to ensure there's no residual peanut left. But in between those, there might be other allergens that you want to do. It depends on the process and operation.
Okay. Yeah. Question from Wasi. My question is whether, as per US FDA labeling requirements, to write word allergen is mandatory, or just the name of the allergen is enough?
Normally on your label, it would say contains and what the allergen is, the name of it, but you need to refer to each country's individual labeling, and there is guidance on labeling that you can look up for that. Particularly, it says contains and what the allergens are. But if you look up the guidance, there's question and answer guidance from the Federal Drug and Cosmetic Act, and there's some information in there. So if you looked that up on Google, so Q&A regarding food allergens, including labeling requirements of the Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act guidance. If you look that up, that will help you.
Great. Question from Andreas. Do you agree to differentiate between allergen-free and no allergens added, because you cannot just say allergen-free without analysing?
I think it depends on your products and the ingredients. It would depend on your products. If you're getting an apple from the farm, I'd be quite happy to say that's allergen free if I'm selling it in my shop. So it depends, I'm afraid, on what the ingredients are.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from Wesley. Label check and retention. Whether retention of the check label is a mandatory requirement.
I don't think it's a mandatory requirement. Records are mandatory requirements in some legislation, so that might fall under that. But it's certainly good practice, and from experience, it's a very, very good idea. So something, if you're not doing, you should consider. Yeah, I mean, you might say I've got my product label retained, but your product, you might only have one sample. And let's say you're doing 10,000 of a product and you've got 1,500 labels on a reel, and I would retain one sample off each reel, so that you've covered all the label reels that were used on that product. So if it ever does come to a problem, you can identify which reel it came from and which stage in production.
Yep, great. Question from Atil. In terms of allergen management, label control is important, as you also mentioned. However, in terms of continuous monitoring, verification can be done during labeling. Do you think it is enough?
The continuous monitoring during labeling is typically things like barcodes and checking labels by online scanners. So that's if people have got the funds and resources for that, that's fine. But other than that, there's periodic checks for quite a significant amount of operations. Would do verification of labels periodically during production.
Very good. A question from Steve. ATP swabs was shown between production runs. Do you consider ATP swabbing to be an adequate check for allergens between product runs? If so, why? As it's not measuring allergenic proteins, but ATP.
ATP is very effective at demonstrating that a clean is infected. It is effective. So you might do a validation of your allergen clean, where you use an ELISA test, and you say my allergens removed. The ATP says it's clean, and you might decide to go forward with that and verify it. But when you do verify that, I would say, and you would perform an extra validation of a first off product to get it tested to make sure there's no allergen no allergen content in that product. But the safest option is to do the ELISA test for verification as well. So the protein test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple of people helping in the chat. Seneca, for US folk, I believe this is the most recent labeling guidance document from
yes.
That's great. And Elisa, just a comment from Elisa. I keep records of all label revisions to verify as labels are delivered, updated when new versions arrive, checklist completed by QA, signed off by label owner, new versions held in quarantine.
Yes, well, I did mention the goods in label checks were there. Yes, in there, and your label your goods in staff should also have an authorized current version of the label to check against.
Okay.
Yes.
Question from Priyanka. In allergen SSOP required when we have general cleaning SSOP in place?
Yeah, you need to, if you're changing over, only, I mean, it all depends on your products you're producing. And if you're changing over from a product which contains an allergen to a product that doesn't contain an allergen, then you need, on your equipment or whatever you're filling or packing with, you need to prove that you've removed that allergen. Now, if you're not changing over allergens and you're running the same product all the time, then you don't need an allergen SOP. But if you do and you're changing over, then you'll need allergen control procedures and an allergen specific clean in place. Now, it might be that your cleaning procedures are sufficient to remove the allergen, and you just need to validate that the procedure doesn't need any enhancements to remove the allergen.
Okay. Mamdu, question. In the cleaning validation, is it mandatory to validate the cleaning process for each allergen, or considering the worst case approach is enough?
If there's multiple allergens in the product, I would do all in the first place. In the first place for validation, so you validate everything. But when it comes to verification, you would then use the worst case scenario, because you've already proven and got evidence that if you take the worst case scenario for your verification, that all the other allergens are removed.
Got you. Question from MD Kabir. In the label, we indicated allergen is milk, soya, peanuts, etc., but product is fruit juice.
Well, labeling's down to your individual legislation, but that sounds quite incredible that you've got milk, soya, and fruit juice. I mean, I can if you're packing milk and soya and fruit juice, I can understand that, but I don't see how you got peanuts in there. So if you're producing milk, soya, and fruit juice on a production line, I could understand why those might be mentioned on the label, but actually the best practice is to not use may contain, because I presume this is a may contain, but the best practice is to have good control procedures in place to ensure the allergens aren't there, rather than saying, well, we'll not bother with any controls. There might be allergens in there, so we'll put a might contain or may contain the allergens, such as soya or milk, on the product label, and that was practice like years ago, but is becoming less and less acceptable these days. Perhaps you could explain why you've got those in a fruit juice in the chat bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Question from John. Any specific standard or regulation for allergen risk control management system?
Well, there's lots of guidance out there. There's codex guidelines. There's a codex code of practice on food allergen management, CXC 80. There's lots of guidance around if you look for it. There's also a vital system, which is quite a stringent allergen control system. But in most GFSI benchmark standards, there's requirements for allergen management in those as well. So quite a bit of information around.
Just on sort of similar subject from Mozzolina, how to develop allergen risk assessment, the basic steps at least maybe.
Right, I touched on that as we were going through.
Yeah.
Sorry, going back to John, there's also guidance in the SQF Food Safety Code regarding, or there was in a previous version, 8.1, I think it was, of allergen clean validation and the allergen clean verification. So coming back to Mussolina, allergen risk assessment. So it starts with the raw materials that you've got coming in. So you assess the materials you've come in. You look at the specifications. You ask the supplier for any risks associated with allergens in the ingredients or materials they're supplying. So you've got that list, okay? So you can look at that and see where there are risks, what products contain allergens, what don't, which recipes they go into, and which final products. So then you look at your process flow and you look at different steps along your process flow, and you assess the risk of cross-contamination of ingredients in the process, mixing, etc., then cooking, pasteurizing, etc., and then filling, packing, whatever. And you look at the risks there of cross-contamination in those operations. And then you look at finished product and the allergen content, and look at risk contamination between finished products when you're filling or packing them. So it's a whole series of areas that you need to look at throughout the process, starting from incoming raw materials to finished products.
Okay. Question from Divina. Let's get that up. Hi, I'm new into US FDA requirements. When a company is asked for evidence of compliance with US FDA food allergen requirements, what can be this document? Thank you.
Well, we've already referred to I'm not going to go into specific FDA requirements, but somebody's already posted a link to that document, Q&A regarding food allergens, including food allergen requirements. And I think there should be something in there that tells you what evidence you require. But I mean, obviously, with food labeling, you need to understand the content of your products, the ingredients in there, what allergens are present, and from your recipe, translate that to your label and document all that, and that's what you should be showing your authorities. But check what it says in that regulation guidance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Priyanka. As per EU and US FDA, how many declared allergens are there?
Yeah, that was one of my slides earlier on. There are 14 EU allergens, and there were 8, but there are now 9 US allergens because sesame was added I think it's January 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that is it for the questions at the moment. Any more questions on the subject, recalls, allergen?
Yeah, we take questions on anything else. If anybody's got any food safety related questions, that isn't a problem.
So that's an offer. Literally anything that's burning, that's causing you a problem in your role or in your workplace, the problem you can't solve, just that's what Tony's here for. So feel free to just add any
if questions. I
can. Not personal issues, just related to food safety and quality. But yeah, and anything. So just on this is we did this first one in November. So we're doing it once a month, we're aiming for. So the next one will probably be middle of January. Oh, here we go.
Can I get you more money?
Michael, Do you need 2 years of documents before you can become SQF certified?
Site, no, you don't. Typically, you need to show some history. So I would say a minimum of 3 months, but probably more likely 6 months at least for new operations. If you've not had any documents and you've been running for 10 years, then I would be seriously worried if I was an SQF auditor. But if you're a new operation just starting up, 3 to 6 months might be okay.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, just to add on that, just because I say 3 to 6 months, because as well as establishing your documents, there are other things in there like internal audits. So you need a certain amount of document history to do an internal audit, and there's also management review in there, and you need a certain amount of history to do a management review. So it's not just about having all the documents available; it's getting on to fundamental requirements of standards, management review, and internal audits as well. Sorry, Simon.
Yeah, no problem. Can you, when you ask a question, can I just ask that you mark it as a question so it goes in the Q&A tab rather than having to pick through the chat? Yeah, but Debbie, yeah, you will get a copy of the slides afterwards. Question from Francis. What about hidden allergens such as soya in flour and compound ingredients?
This is where there's quite a bit of emphasis in there on raw material and supplier approval and monitoring procedures and control of suppliers. So those suppliers you need to approve. They need to be approved by either GFSI benchmark standard if they're high risk or an audit. So GFSI certified to GFSI benchmark standard. You need to have specifications and you need to have information from them about the likely risk of allergen content in their products. So you need that analysis from your suppliers to be able to do your assessments.
Okay, great. Right, lots of questions now. Priyanka, please elaborate on declarations on labels may contain and contain allergens.
These are all down to individual legislation in different countries. But what I will say is, if it contains an allergen, it clearly should say an allergen and what the allergen is. Now, may contains is being frowned on. Before it was used where there was a risk of cross-contamination. And now what authorities and standards are saying is you can only use may contain if you've put in place all possible good manufacturing practices to prevent cross-contamination of that allergen. And if you've done that and you're still not 100% confident that the allergen is excluded and the product may contain that, that's the only justification you've got for using may contain. But authorities are now steering away from may contain. Yeah.
Right. Question from Riaz. Testing for allergens in finished products for positive release, could we use a validated quick lateral flow method versus longer ELISA method?
I would want mine tested by an independent third-party certified laboratory that's certified to ISO 17025. So once you've done that, then you need to validate the own tests that you're using on site. So you need to do your own validation on site. So. But have that validation backed up by an independent laboratory that's certified for the test method that you're asking them to use.
Yeah, makes sense. A question from Ahmed: how can we implement food allergy policy on a small food business if there's any specific requirements?
You might have a policy for staff bringing allergens on site, Your allergen control policy will say that you can't bring allergens on site, or you can't take products into your food handling or storage areas. So there can be, even for small businesses, that's control of allergens in the catering outlets, if there is a catering outlets or lunchrooms, control of things that you can take into product areas.
Okay. Another question from Ahmed. I've just missed. I'll move back to that one. One from Timothy. Where in the food supply chain do we have the highest risk of allergen control failure?
In the supply chain.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't know. I think it's down to your suppliers and ingredients. If you're asking me where most of the allergen cross-contamination comes through in the food industry and food manufacturing, I would say it's cross-contamination in facilities, or failing to label products adequately with the labels in there. But for such a broad question from the supply chain, then I wouldn't like to say.
Okay. Yeah. Ahmed have found the question: what's the frequency or regularity of sampling for food allergens in food facilities?
Well, when you start off, if this is allergen control, when you start off manufacturing a product with allergen, you would have sampling for allergen. If you revert to a product that doesn't contain that allergen, but sampling for food allergens will depend on the regularity and frequency of sampling for food allergens depends on the products that you're producing and the product ranges that you're producing. So if you're producing a lot of products with a lot of different allergens, then you will need some sort of verification or validation of that changeovers between products ensure there's no allergen crossover or cross-contamination between products. So it's an open-end. That's another open-end question, really.
Okay. Another question from Ahmed. For edible packaging, how can we control allergens?
Well, same as I already mentioned, specifications for the packaging, control of suppliers, supplier approval, checking with suppliers any possible allergen content or allergen cross-contamination, all the same things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another one from Ahmed. Is it mandatory to label all potential allergens even present as traces in the raw materials?
It's Ahmed, you need to refer to your own legislation, as I've already said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elisa, would you speak on denatured soybean oil and best practice for declaration on our ingredient list?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert on denatured soybean oil and best practices. The problem with oils is that typically people are saying they don't contain the allergen or the protein, but obviously this might be a possibility from contamination. So again, what I'm going to say to you is your declaration will be as per requirements on your legislation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Riaz, AOAC approved and validated by the lateral flow allergen testing kit manufactured by using spike studies on specific products would be sufficient, right?
I've already answered the question regarding testing, in that I think that whatever test you're using needs to be validated by a certified laboratory that's accredited for the tests that you're checking the allergen that you're using. So that's certified to ISO 17025.
Okay. Ahmed's just added one more question. From food safety perspective, what is the critical limit for allergens above that it shall be declared?
Yeah, I mean, there's guidance, Ahmed. There's guidance on threshold limits and reference days, so the maximum. So it would vary from product and the amount of your product that somebody eats in a single serving, and it varies with legislation. And if you haven't got guidelines from legislation, then the World Health Organization and FAO publish allergen guidelines. So the FAO provide allergen guidance on threshold levels. So you could look that up if you don't have relevant legislation.
Was that the same answer for this one from Mussolina? Is there any specific limits on celery?
Yes, that's the same.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Any more questions? We've got just a couple of minutes to go. I'll just let you know. Do you want to mention the offer at this point?
Sure. Let's do that. So we're offering 15% off on our food safety manuals for GFSI recognized certification programs. They contain editable procedure templates, training, lots of tools to implement the package, including technical support until you achieve certification. And there's an offer there. Use code 15% FSE 2 in capitals to get 15% off our food safety management system certification packages. We've got the main standards covered, including BRCGS, SQF, FSSC 22000 for food packaging, storage and distribution, and some food service.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not just necessarily for brand new, seeking certification. I'm sure as a very good reference for gaps and improving current systems as well, like you say.
So certainly would be best practices rather than the minimum you need to achieve to get certification. It's they're very comprehensive.
Okay, so if anybody's interested, just click that link in the sidebar, and the code's there for 15% off, and that'll be running till the end of December. Okay. Also, it is recorded this. We will follow up with everybody by email with the recording, copy of the slides. We'll include a link to the package and the certificate of attendance, which I can put in for you now, actually. Any more questions before we finish?
See one from John there. How to practically control all products labels mentioned contain of allergen. I think you need to get on top of your supplier, John, and get them to confirm what and what isn't present, and what they're actually just using as if they're just issuing a disclaimer, which is not really acceptable in current days. You need to have firm information on the risk associated with the ingredients you're purchasing, not that they handle all these allergens on site and what you're purchasing may contain them. That's not really acceptable.
Okay. Right. That's brilliant. That's been great content and lots of questions answered. So super. I think we had 600 and something people register for the first one, 906 for this. So we'll. Do we know the subject for January yet, Tony? Have you got...
No, but hopefully, if we can get something posted on the website, we'll put a list of topics, and people can offer up what they prefer to see, and we probably make them shorter and sweeter, but unless work in preparation for me, but more on general food safety questions in the new year.
Great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, then. Thanks for your time today, Tony, and thanks for everybody that attended today and for joining in and engaging.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye now.